Welcome to episode 29 of Stories of Gumption podcast. Conversations with entrepreneurs, creative thinkers, and just really, really impressive people. This podcast is brought to you by Spar-Kil-Kleen, and in light of everything going on in the world with the coronavirus and many of us working from home, it doesn't hurt to check who your cleaning contractor is. Spar-Kil-Kleen provides professional and economic cleaning solutions to residential and commercial structures. They specialize in window cleaning, floor care, carpet extraction, and auto or boat detailing. Give them a call for an estimate, 518-578-2931. They're also on Facebook and Instagram at Spar-Kil-Kleen. That's Zach and Kate Hoyt, everybody. And a fun fact relevant to the recent coronavirus you might be interested in, they're actually now certified. This is a certification, not just saying this. They are legitimately certified to offer professional disinfection services. What does that mean? That means that they can guarantee 99.99999% of germs and viruses are removed from your facility. That's wild. But give them a call. They're great people. Love them. Zach and Kate Hoyt. They are at 518-578-2931, and that's Spar-Kil-Kleen. Podcast is also brought to you by Hevans Designs. Hevans Designs takes the stress out of selling, organizing, and designing your home. They give you tips that help you stage, organize, and sell your home quickly. And they'll even post or write an ad for you and list it on Zillow or other web platforms. They're trying to help you take the stress out of selling your home and help you stay in complete control the entire time. You're not selling your home? Well, they're here to help you organize, design, and create a beautiful home that is a reflection of you. They can give you quick tips and tricks that will help you increase the value of your home by making tiny changes that cost very little. Visit them and follow them on Instagram at Hevans Designs. That's HOMEHEVANSDESIGNS. Hevans Designs. You can also give them a call at 518-593-5416. That's 518-593-5416. And lastly, but certainly not least, the podcast is also brought to you by Alexander Edwards & Company, CPAs PC. They're located at 47 Dock Street in Plattsburgh, New York. Phone number 518-563-1600. Alexander Edwards & Company has been providing common sense solutions to many North Country businesses, real-life accounting, and tax problems since 1920. Yeah, it's not their first rodeo. It's tax time, everybody. Bring them your problems. They're going to provide solutions. They're a full-service public accounting firm engaged in tax preparation, bookkeeping, audits, estate planning, financial planning, and management consultation. That's Alexander Edwards & Company, CPAs, PC, 518-563-1600. Hey, today's episode, what a good one. Ever thought about starting your own business? Today's guest has started 12. Ever thought about changing careers? Today's guest has also done that a couple times. Ever thought about being on a board for a local nonprofit? Yep, he's done that too. The resume and life experiences of today's guests it's just incredible. And I was incredibly inspired by everything we talked about from start to finish in this podcast, from him going to be in med school and then realizing that maybe school wasn't for him, relocating across the country, becoming a paramedic, delivering an emergency childbirth in a restaurant. I mean, crazy stories. And then he goes along and how he became a published author and all these other things, and it's just incredibly inspiring to me. His story, where he started, where he is now, and where he's going. I hope you enjoy this episode of the Stories of Gumption podcast. Gumption, defined as initiative, aggressiveness, resourcefulness, courage, spunk, guts, common sense, and shrewdness. Welcome to the podcast. This is Stories of Gumption with your host, Ryan Lee. Today, my guest is quite an impressive person that I've been very fortunate to meet, and I hope to spend quite a bit more time learning from him and all his life experiences as life goes on. But he is currently the president and CEO of Behavioral Health Services North in Plattsburgh and the North Country. He is the president of the board of the North Winds Integrated Health Network. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about that. He's a faculty member at Plattsburgh State School of Business and Economics. He is a managing partner at Capitus, which is a management consulting firm. He is a published author. He's on several other boards throughout the Champlain Valley. I'm losing breath with this amazing intro. Welcome to the podcast, Mark Lukens.
Well, thank you. I hope I can live up to that.
Well, I'm very happy to have you on the podcast. Actually, this originated from, I think, you and I had met probably 2-3 years ago, I think, at the Chamber.
We did.
And I remember that fondly, but I had Mark Hamilton on this podcast, who is now a business partner of yours.
Correct.
And I remember somewhere in there, he's like, oh, yeah, Mark, you got to get Mark on this thing. Well, here we are. I don't know, maybe not quite a year, but quite a few months later, here you are. Got you on the podcast.
Beautiful. Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Well, I just wanted to kick things off and give the listeners who may or may not know who you are a little bit more about your background. So tell me where you grew up, where the origination of Mark Lukens.
Sure. So if we go way, way back, right? Born in Montana.
No kidding.
Yep.
I was born in Montana.
Oh, yeah?
Great Falls.
Billings.
Nice.
So my dad came back from Vietnam, spent time in Montana. He was finishing up his degree work for college. So born in Montana, spent a couple years there. From there, we moved over to Massachusetts. Or I'm sorry, Michigan in the middle.
Oh, there you go.
Spent some time in Michigan and then out to Massachusetts. After Massachusetts, still pretty young then, moved to suburban Philadelphia, where I spent most of my younger years through high school graduation. Graduated high school, went to Penn State, being a Pennsylvania kid.
Nice.
That worked out really well for the first 3.5 years. And then moved around a little bit after that.
Nice. So you said it worked out well for the first few years here. Tell me about that.
Indeed. So I went from high school, jumped right into college.
Yep.
Really entered Penn State thinking one of two directions. One was engineering, just because it seemed like the thing to do.
Sure.
And then the second one was pre-med. And I spent most of my younger years. At 15, I was an EMT in Pennsylvania.
Nice.
By age 16, I was deputy chief of volunteer ambulance service. By age 17, I was chief of that same ambulance service. So I spent most of my life outside of high school working the ambulance or working a job. It's just what I always did.
Yeah.
So I decided to do the pre-med route. Obviously, the first 4 years of your undergrad is anything but pre-med. So it's the math, the sciences, and all this other stuff.
Yeah, of course.
But I did really well for the first 3 years. And then all of a sudden, something clicked. And it wasn't a good click. Ended up coming into the end of year 3, year 4, and for some reason decided that skipping class was a heck of a lot more fun than being in class. And GPA just grounded. I mean, went from 3+ GPA to I think a 1.6 is what I came home with that particular semester.
Woof.
Yeah. Pretty dramatic impact.
Yeah.
But came home, talked to my parents. This would have been right before Christmas holiday.
Okay.
And told them I was going to drop out of college.
Wild.
And they looked at me and they said, okay, what are you going to do?
Wow.
And
my parents would have been like, to hell you're not.
I was actually expecting a little more of that, to be honest.
Yeah,
it was. I think it was a rather surprising response.
Interesting.
But what ended up coming from it is I said, I think I just need to do something different.
Yeah.
And I took a little bit of time, but eventually a friend of mine and I decided that, we're 20 years old. Where should a 20-year-old be? Well, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, of course. So,
of course.
Yeah.
Sunny beaches and...
It sounded like the place to be,
Yeah.
right from the pictures. I never spent
Yeah.
time there, but from the pictures, it seemed
Yeah.
like the place to be as a 20-year-old boy. We packed up a U-Haul, put our cars on the trailer, put my car on the trailer, and we drove to Fort Lauderdale.
That sounds very eerily similar to your business partner, Mark Hamilton. I think he shared something about like he up and went to. I don't think he finished school, but I think he
did.
like jumped off and went to California for a while. Yeah,
He did.
That's funny. Well, anyhow, I take a digression. Yeah.
It's a good one. It's a good one.
So you go to Fort Lauderdale.
Went to Fort Lauderdale, spent probably a week or two there.
Yeah.
Really didn't like it at all.
Oh, well, that worked out.
Yeah. Lived out of my U-Haul. So
Okay.
I used to roll up the back of my U-Haul and sleep on the couch that we had in the back of the U-Haul for a
No
couple days.
kidding.
And realized that I really didn't like Fort Lauderdale. So got a little bit of concern, probably a little bit scared is probably the better word, and decided to make a beeline right across the state.
Okay.
So I figured Fort Lauderdale, East Coast, maybe the West Coast is better.
Yeah.
So we shot right across Alligator Alley and ended up in the town of Fort Myers.
Yep.
And got to Fort Myers and liked it. Seemed like a
Nice.
really nice town. So established ourselves, got an apartment, got a job working as a medic when I was down there. And it was interesting because one of the first things I did upon arriving, I don't even think the 2 weeks had passed in Fort Myers, re-enrolled in college.
No kidding.
Right. I think somewhere in that time, and maybe it was just because Fort Lauderdale scared the SH out of me, that I said, you know what? Don't be stupid, Mark. Get
Yeah.
yourself back in school.
Yeah.
So I was working as a medic, which was a passion of mine,
Yep.
going to school as well. And while I was down there, it also gave me the opportunity to explore my entrepreneurial side
Nice.
while I was there.
Nice. How long were you a medic?
I've been a medic since 1989, 90.
Wow.
And I mean, in theory, on Pennsylvania's books, I'm still a medic today.
Nice.
So I would say I was an active medic for about
Nice.
20 years as a volunteer, as
Wow.
a paid medic. I did quite a few years under a SWAT medic program that was started
wow.
in the state of Florida back before. I mean, I know there's some SWAT programs today where actually medics are trained to arm themselves and protect themselves. Back then, that wasn't the case. So we were
Wow.
just taught how to duck and cover.
Wow.
But it was a neat experience. So I did some training in Metro Dade with that in Miami. Worked on a helicopter as a flight medic for a little while when I was down there. But just a great experience.
Wow.
You know, working 24-hour shifts as a medic, which gave me, you know, we worked 24 on, 48 off. So it
Yep.
gave me time to focus on schoolwork. And it gave me time to focus on this itch that I had, which I never knew I had, which was to really get into the business side of the house.
Yeah. Yeah. And I certainly want to talk all about your business endeavors and opportunities you've taken, but because that's very impressive to me. But this medic experience is also very interesting to me. So you must have some crazy stories. I know there's confidentiality and things you can't go into, but the SWAT medic, you must have seen some stuff.
You do see some stuff. I think the most interesting thing, if it's funny, we're just talking about being a medic, I think last week at work. And, you know, the good and bad of it is I've truly gotten to see the best in people.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I've seen the worst in people
Interesting.
and everything in between. So, yeah, there's some great stories. There's stories of, you know, what made you think you could do that with your body? What made you think that you could fit into that particular opening?
Yeah. Yeah.
What made you decide that eating that was a good idea?
Yeah.
Right? Those types of things where, you know, the outcomes are all positive, but you
Yeah.
can look back on it and there was some interesting stuff that people used to do.
Holy smokes.
I delivered my first baby when I was 16.
No kidding.
Yep.
Wow.
And, you know, I've delivered 10 or 11 since that time.
Holy
over
smokes.
those years. Probably, again, the most frightening experience of my life.
Really?
Even after doing it 8 or 9 times, it's still the most frightening experience of someone's
Really?
life.
And I can imagine all the reasons why it would be frightening, but for you, what was the most frightening part of that experience, you think? I mean,
So go back to being a 16 or 17-year-old,
yeah.
being exposed to
That.
being exposed to that, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, to be completely blunt, the whole female anatomy at that
Yeah.
time in my age was an experience in itself.
Sure.
Right? Wasn't all that aware about all of that stuff
Yeah.
other than what the books tell you.
You're right. Right.
But yeah, it was a young couple at a Pizza Hut restaurant.
Wow.
And I'll never forget it because I remember that one of the coverages that we had to do on the ground when we gave delivery, because it happened so quick, was the old red and white checkered tablecloths of a Pizza Hut.
No kidding.
And I'll never think about Pizza Hut any other way than those old red and white checkered tablecloths.
Wow.
So
That's
great
wild.
experience. I've had others where, people have been in the car and you just haven't quite got to the hospital and you do a delivery. But it's an interesting experience.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think I'm meant for that.
I don't think any of us are meant for it. I mean, you do what you need to do in the moment, but
Sure.
it's not something I hang on my wall and say, wow, can't wait for that to happen again.
Yeah, sure. And they say the best medics are the ones who, in the moment, they just react. They don't think about it. You're trained and you know what you have to do. And then after the fact, all of a sudden you're like, whoa, what just happened?
That is the truth.
Yeah.
That is really the truth.
And the people
right?
who are not the best medics are the ones who are having that reflective moment in the middle of it, right?
Yeah, there's a core role when you're there to be empathetic, right? You have to have empathy for what's going on so you can associate with what's going on. That's how you get to the core of what the issue is sometimes. But the whole experience, right? You're sitting in an ambulance station or you're sitting there waiting for the call to come in. And at any moment of any day, you just know you're always 30 seconds away from the pager going off, the buzzer going off, whatever it is. And you hear the buzzer and you're sitting there. And your heart starts to beat faster, right? Because you're waiting for the words that come next to tell you what you're going to.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
sometimes there is, you look back on it, and I think even today, if I was still sitting in the medic unit waiting for that to happen and the buzzer goes off, you still get that heightened sense, right? That anxiety that potentially comes over you. Your heart starts beating faster. Your blood pressure's changing.
Yep.
And you get all pumped up for that moment. Because sometimes you're nervous, sometimes you're scared, sometimes you're excited and it's just the adrenaline kicking in, but you literally have no idea what you're going to be subject to 3 minutes later.
Wow.
And, it's been a little bit of everything at that moment in time. So it's exhilarating, it's frightening as heck, but I wouldn't have had it any other way.
Yeah.
Because it's made me who I am.
That's amazing. That's an amazing experience. So I want to get into your business side because there's a lot to that.
There is.
But before we get there, what does gumption mean to you?
What does gumption mean to me? I think there's some degrees of gumption, but I think, if I wanted to tell that, if I go back to the tale I just told of my college career, I think it's a good example of that. I was not a great college student. Now, with that said, you're going to talk a little bit later about me being a college professor, which, what does that mean? But it's funny. When I'm in college classes, I actually tell my students on day one, I tell them my story. I tell them the fact that I dropped out of college. I tell them the fact that I was really a poor student. I didn't engage. I wasn't interested. But when I look back on that, right, when I got to Florida, when I got to Fort Myers and I looked at things, I really did not want to go back to school. I didn't. But I knew I had to, right? So it's that push for sometimes reasons other than what we know at the time. Those paths that we take, not necessarily for reasons that we fully understand at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I think those are the stories as we relate to the concept of gumption. Even some of my business endeavors, some of the businesses I've started over my years have been very opportunistic, right? Something just happens, a moment in time, a spark. And from that, something else happens, right? I think those are those moments that we're talking about here.
Yeah. I agree with you. I think everybody has to have a critical moment in their life where, you're transitioning. I envision this personally for me as when I actually studied abroad in Australia. But
that's wild.
It is wild. There's a lot of wild stuff over there that can kill you. But I think where I'm going with this is I think everybody needs at some point in their life especially around the transition of, okay, I live with mom and dad or grandma, grandpa, or whoever it is I live with, and then all of a sudden I'm on my own. I'm doing the college thing. I'm going into the workforce. You got to have that critical moment where it's like, I'm legitimately on my own. I'm responsible for myself 110%, and this is actually not easy. Nothing's being spoon-fed anymore. And I had that when I was in Australia, the opposite side of the globe, and it was awesome. But it sounds like you kind of had this when you went to Fort Lauderdale and then
Fort Myers.
Fort Myers, yep. So I think that's a critical piece to people discovering that they have gumption in them, probably.
Yeah, I think it's a great story. That college experience is a great story because I think it allows me to relate with students in quite a different way. Right? The fact is our paths are not linear.
Yeah.
Right? They zig, they zag.
Yep.
And that's okay.
Yep.
Because that's what creates us.
Exactly.
And I actually wish when you look at the whole academic cycle, the academic process, I wish it was less linear. Because I think we lose too many people in that process, so we push people through the process in the wrong way sometimes.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that. So how many businesses have you started?
So the success of them doesn't matter here, right?
No.
All right. That's good. So,
because I also am a big believer that just because you started a business and maybe it quote unquote failed, it doesn't mean it was a bad thing. Like, there's a lot to be learned from that, and we could probably talk for hours and hours on end about that. But
indeed.
How many?
Yeah, I don't think when you think about it that way. So getting back to the number, 9 or 10, depending on how formal of a business you want it to be.
Yeah.
Let's call it just shy of a dozen.
Okay.
I would say half of them were what I would deem to be successful in some form or fashion.
Okay. So what I mean, we probably can't talk about all of them. So what was the first real, like, wow, I just put something amazing together? What was the first one?
So the first one was actually my experience in Fort Myers.
Okay.
So I'm sitting there in my U-Haul, right? And I'm running the air conditioner quite a bit because I spent, nights sleeping in the back. And when it got too hot, I'd have to go to the front. But when I first moved to Fort Myers, I had to fill up the diesel tank on the U-Haul before I took it back. And I'm standing there at the Exxon gas pump. And I remember it well because it was the first time I stood at a gas pump that actually spoke to me. Right? All of a sudden, this audio started coming out of it. I mean, this was a long time ago now. This is, 90, 91 era. But I'm standing there, and I hear a conversation on the other side of the gas pump. And it was two women who were talking about the fact that they were hopping from job A to job B, right? They were nurses.
Mm-hmm.
Talking about their schedule. They work 3 or 4 different places, et cetera, et cetera. So when I walked past them, they said hello to me. I said hello to them. I got to know them a little bit, and my entry point was trying to find an apartment that I could rent. So they keyed me in an apartment complex. But anyway, from that discussion, it created an opportunity, right? So as I spoke to them further, what I came to learn was that there was this group of nurses who were literally working 3, 4, 5 jobs. And they'd hop around from employer A to employer B to employer C because they couldn't get the full amount of hours at a single employer. And because of that, some of them didn't have health benefits, some of the other perks.
Yep.
So I looked at it and said, wow, why couldn't they work for, today it's so commonplace, agencies and all these other things, but why couldn't they be working for one company who then subbed out portions of their time to multiple organizations? And we said, what if we could build that? So first pass on it, it just seemed like a novel idea. But I had no money.
Mm-hmm.
I was having a hard time scraping together my first month apartment plus my security deposit. So I didn't do anything with it right off the bat. I sat on it a little bit, got an apartment, got myself in school. But a few months later, I was honored to have met a gentleman who actually moved into the apartment across the hallway from me. He was a retired executive from a movie company, moved from Texas to Florida. Great man. And in conversations, became a friend of his. And we started talking about, for some reason one day, and I don't even remember what spurred the conversation, But I started talking about this idea. And he's like, that does sound like a good idea. I'm like, okay. And he's like, what would it take to start something like that? I'm like, well, I really don't know. I never did a business plan. So we sat down, we started playing with some numbers. And there was a mentorship piece there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's probably one of the few times in my life where I could actually look at it and say, you know what, there's somebody there that I learned a great deal from a mentor perspective. But we worked through this business plan. We came up with a concept, and he's like, I'd be willing to seed it. So we put some money in. We started a business. You know, he was obviously the majority shareholder by the nth degree.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have any money in it. But we started to build this concept. And I was still working my job, still going to school, so I didn't have time to do a lot with it. But we built it out. And it got to the point where it was viable. All right? We had a couple dozen nurses on the books. We were subbing out their time across multiple agencies. It made a lot of sense. A few years later, probably I shouldn't even say few, it was about a year and a half, 2 years later, things had started to change in his life, and we ended up selling off the company. Right? It was actually acquired by another nursing agency in that region. So he was able to get his money back and everything else. So I didn't walk away with anything, really, other than the fact that I could say it was part of this idea. I developed an idea, developed a concept, and I had someone there that could help me from a financial perspective to bring it to market. And it worked. And that was it. That's all it took for me to never think twice about it again. And from that moment in time, I switched my college focus from pre-med, from engineering to business.
Interesting.
Started as an organizational behavior undergrad, and then did my MBA after that. Solely on business focus, and since that time, I just can't get enough of it.
Yeah.
You know, I look back at my childhood, and I was the Lego kid. I don't know if Legoer is a word, but I was a Legoer.
Yeah. Connects for me.
There you go.
Connects.
There you go.
You familiar with Connects?
I know Connects. I never had a set.
Legos too, but yeah,
Legos,
I feel you.
Tinker Toys.
Oh yeah, there we go.
A Rector set.
Yes.
Right? That was... God, that was my childhood. I had so many Legos that we had this big folding bag just to keep them in. But I used to love building things. And I loved the concept of that marriage of really the mind and the physical, right? The mind and the hands, the art and the science, as I like to call it today.
Yep.
Right? That perfect marriage of coming up with a vision, an idea, a concept, and then being able to kind of roll up your sleeves and actually build it.
Yeah.
And then if you didn't like what you built, you could always tear it apart a little bit and rebuild it. Right?
Exactly.
That was the beauty of it.
Yep. And that is essentially, in a very simplified manner, what starting a business and running a business is.
Most definitely.
Yeah. So where'd you go after that? You had, I count one of the 12 here. So where did life take you after that?
So from there, I started to realize, I didn't start to realize, but after a few years in Florida, I realized that I wasn't made for Florida physically. It's too hot.
Yeah.
It's just too hot. So probably spent about 4.5 years total in Florida. Again, finished up my undergrad, got some more medic time under my belt, had a good time, but then came back to Philadelphia. Got back to Philadelphia. That's where I finished my MBA when I got back to Philadelphia. Got out of the entrepreneurial side for a little bit, took a job as U.S. clinical lead for a critical care services provider in Philadelphia, one of the largest providers in the country. So again, staying in with that medical side of my experience. And then over a few years from there, I spent some time in the public sector. I decided that I wanted to try a government job for a while. So I did that under the Pennsylvania Department of Health for a couple years. And then did a couple of ventures along the way, right? Tried to start an internet company one time, did some consulting companies along the way, had a market research company at one time, which was one of my more successful endeavors, doing market research primarily in the pharmaceutical space.
Very cool.
So I used to work with pharmaceutical companies on their phase 1, phase 2 clinical trials, and then go out and conduct focus groups or individual depth interviews with physicians regarding the data, what we're seeing from those results.
So you never really left your medical background. Like it seems like your businesses have gravitated back to your knowledge in that area too.
Or it's always been an overlay.
Yeah.
Right? It's always been there. When there have been times where I've moved away from it. My time with Augustine, some other things on the consulting side. But somewhere, some way, I always touched something in the healthcare space.
And so now today you're the CEO of Behavioral Health Services North.
Indeed.
What's the elevator pitch for those listening to the podcast who have no idea what that is?
So Behavioral Health Services North, an organization that's been in this area for a century plus, one of the largest providers of behavioral health services, as well as a lot of social determinant services, housing, supported education, supported employment programs, family well-being programs. It's a team of 250 plus individuals that are, when you talk about those people that impact your life, right? Those are the people that, you see that spark day in and day out. And you just know being around them and what they do and the impact they have. That's what drives me to be there every damn day.
Yeah, right. Right.
That's the power of it. So great organization, doing fantastic things in this community. Growing quite a bit over the past few years, which is fantastic because it's a real unmet need, continues to be an unmet need across this region. And I mean, the results that they're seeing and the things that they're doing are absolutely fantastic.
That's awesome. That's awesome. What actually brought you to that gig? I'm curious. I feel like I've never asked you that question because you weren't from this area, obviously.
No. So I was heavy into did a lot of consulting work in 2004 through 2007, 2008. Really heavy in the Fortune 500 space at that time. Doing a lot of work specifically in the HR space. So we were doing heavy-duty recruiting for a lot of Fortune 500 companies.
Very cool.
When 2008 rolled around, we had a little bit of a glitch in the economic process, right?
Sure.
The economy faltered a bit.
People didn't want to pay a premium anymore to hire somebody, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So one of the first things companies did is start to shut down hiring. And we had a significant downsize. So at that time, I was president of an organization, which I did not own, but I was president of a company. There was a sole owner who I was working with. But the company downsized dramatically. And at that time, my wife Lynn and I looked at each other. And there is a little bit of backstory here, so let me take a couple steps back.
Sure.
So my parents retired up this way several years before that.
Oh, okay.
So they were the type of folks that would take weekend trips all the time. One weekend they came up here, they landed on Lake Placid and fell in love with it.
Nice.
They bought a condo on Lake Placid, and it was our vacation spot for 5, 6, 7 years straight. It's the only place my family used to come for a vacation was Lake Placid. 2004, 2005, 2006, I don't remember the exact year, they retired up here to Saranac Lake. And we've always been really close with my parents. My kids are very close with my parents.
Yeah.
So 2008 rolls around. Lynn and I, my wife and I, look at each other and say, well, if we're ever going to move, now's an opportune time. So I got out of the work I was doing in Pennsylvania. And we packed up and we moved to Peru, New York, right, in an attempt to be closer to my family. Really didn't feel good about the economy, right? Wasn't gutsy enough to roll the dice on a new business adventure at that time. So I took a job at the hospital. I worked at CVPH for close to 3 years.
Nice.
By the time 2012 rolled around, I started to feel really good about the economy again. So in 2012, I launched a business called Method 3. Method 3, again, was a management consulting company. But again, it was very heavy into the IT space. It was also really heavy into the HR space. So HR outsourcing, human resources, performance improvement initiatives, things like that. So we started that company, grew it rather rapidly, up until just over a year and a half ago now. And about a year and a half ago, I actually sold my stake in that company. But during that journey, when I came up here in 2009, I think it was 9 or 10, I came across some individuals who were on the board of BHSN. And being new blood in the town, I was asked if I'd be interested in serving on the board.
Shark bait. Ooh-ha.
Yeah, perhaps, right? There's a new person in town.
Yeah. This guy might be good shark bait here. Let's bring him in. Yeah. He might be able to add some knowledge here.
Could be.
Yeah.
Right? Who knows?
You never know.
So I joined the board of BHSN. I served on the
cool.
board for 5 years, almost 6 years by the time I was done. But I spent most of those years, the latter half of those years, as chairman of the board.
Oh, wow. I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
Well, I guess why would I, right? But that's great.
Yeah,
That's cool.
so that was my exposure to the organization. That's how I really fell in love with the organization, became passionate about the organization, its people, and what they do. Near the end of that time, so going back 4 years now, there was a separation between the CEO at that time and the organization.
Yep.
And during that separation period, we were going out to market. We were recruiting for the CEO slot, et cetera. But during that interim period of time, I actually served as the volunteer CEO. And again, that was my chance to really dig in, get to know the people. And during that short stint when I was serving in that volunteer role, so I was still on the board, but trying to fill that void that was there until we recruited a CEO, I literally fell in love with the place.
Funny how that happens.
Yeah. I mean, you never know when inspiration's going to strike.
Yeah.
But there was something so special about the people, something so special about the mission and the vision, and something so special about the potential in it all.
Yeah.
Right? And going back to my business hat,
Yep.
wearing that business hat, I love potential.
Yep.
And I put in for the CEO job. Went through the recruiting process with the board, and I was selected as the final candidate and offered the role. And it felt good.
Nice.
Right? We all take positions in our lives. We accept jobs in our lives. And sometimes it feels okay. Right?
You're
it's
like, all right,
it's a good fit.
this
It's a
could
job.
be good. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not sure, but well, I'm a little nervous. We'll see what happens, right? But
Yeah. This just felt good. It felt right. Right? There was no second guessing it. There was no should I, shouldn't I. And, I truly felt I was taking a job for, go back to the concept of gumption perhaps a little bit here as well. Not typically for the reasons that I would take a job, but I felt like I was being driven or pushed or motivated or inspired in a way that resulted in this direction.
you saw the big picture impact that could be.
Yeah, it was a pretty significant experience in my life. It's a pretty significant moment in my life, and I've been enjoying it ever since.
That's awesome. I mentioned this in your intro as well, and I'm just pivoting a little bit away from BHSN, but you are the president of the board for Northwind's Integrated Health Network.
Correct. So Northwind's Integrated Health Network is an organization that was started just over a year ago in this region. It's comprised of 14 different organizations that covers the geographic area from Glens Falls out to Ogdensburg, up to Messina, Malone, to Plattsburgh.
Wow.
Really large area. And it's compiled of all, I believe even still today, it's every Article 31 and 32 provider in that region, being those organizations provide both mental health services, behavioral health services, as well as substance services. And we created this entity. These 14 organizations came together because we realized that the healthcare market's changing. And we realized that there's power in collaboration. And together we can be stronger. So this entity came together. I've had the honor of being president of the board and helping to lead this initiative along with 14 of my colleagues who are also CEOs or executive directors of their organizations in an attempt to make us all stronger as a whole and to truly have an opportunity to transform how we view care across this region.
Yeah.
So still very much in its infancy, but an organization that has a tremendous amount of potential as we go forward.
So is this, the first thing that pops into my head is sort of a parallel to what's in process, been in process, some of it's finalized, some of it's still in process of UVM Health Network with hospitals, sort of for behavioral and substance abuse organizations. Am I drawing an appropriate parallel, or is it different?
So from a collaborative perspective, then yes. But from a physical structure perspective, no.
Okay.
Right? So the beauty of this organization is those 14 entities are individual entities.
Yep.
Right?
Okay.
They have complete autonomy. They have complete corporate structure. They are 14 individual companies who have come together to say that we have an opportunity to do something pretty significant in this region as it relates to behavioral health care. And it's really the passion and that persistence of those individuals to come together that's really going to drive this forward.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. So, like, what kind of collaboration can you talk about that you're trying to implement amongst the organizations? What kind of examples, I guess?
Right. So part of it is we're still learning by doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're 14 organizations that do
that must be a challenge just because of the number of organizations involved.
And the diversity of the geography,
yeah,
the diversity of the size of the organizations, et cetera. But again, it's that opportunity to have those moments with people that we typically don't get to engage with day in and day out, which I think is the powerful part of the story. But we know healthcare is changing. We know the cost of healthcare is growing at a rate that's not sustainable long term.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that the marketplace may change the way it reimburses for healthcare, or we may be forced to change the way that we are reimbursed for healthcare. So with all of that said, we saw that there's an opportunity for us to try to get ahead of this. How do we become part of the solution versus having something thrust upon us, right? Maybe we can help shape, help develop what care needs to look like, and in doing so, potentially drive down the cost, increase access to those critical services across this region.
Yeah, it's definitely critically needed, I would say.
No doubt.
And that's for coming from an outsider looking in that at least at the present doesn't need services, but that could change for anybody at any given time, right? You never know. And there's certainly a stigma around that needs to be put to the side, or I don't know.
No doubt about it.
Yeah, and it seems like the power of your network is going to help keep the conversation alive, at least, which can help.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. It's a beautiful thing.
Well, if you're not busy enough, you're also you're also a faculty member at Plattsburgh State.
My hobby.
Holy smokes, that must keep you sharp.
It does. I've been teaching for 20 years plus now. I've taught nursing classes. I've taught in MBA programs when I was in Pennsylvania. One of the first things I did when I came up here is I had the opportunity to join the talented faculty of SUNY Plattsburgh.
Nice.
And I teach a variety of classes depending on the semester. Most semesters I carry 2 classes, give or take. But it is truly, I mean, there's some days where I count the minutes until class starting because there's just something so special about teaching, about education, but about doing it. And for me, it's about doing it in a way that's somewhat non-traditional. I try to learn from the experiences that I've had and try to be a little more practical, a little bit more hands-on in my approaches. But the power of sitting in front of 30, 40, 50 students, most of which are bright-eyed, wanting to have a dialogue about something.
Yeah.
And, again, to your point that you just made, it's probably one of the ways I'm able to keep myself so sharp because I never know what they're going to ask me. And sometimes they'll ask me questions and I have no idea what the answer is, so I have to do my own research to be able to provide an answer to it. But it keeps me sharp, keeps my skills honed, and allows me to focus on some things that I don't get to focus on between the hours of 8 and 5 on my day job or between the hours of 5 and 10 when I'm doing my night job. So a lot of my classes are around strategic management. I do some classes in the HR area. I do a lot of classes in marketing, that type of stuff. So I love it. Yeah. Even if I wasn't getting a paycheck, I would still do it.
Yeah. Some people know this about me and others don't, but I originally, my game plan was to be a high school science teacher.
Yeah.
And I had it all ready. I was certified, ready to go. And then there were a bunch of teaching cuts in New York State. And it was like, oh, got to find something different, right? But obviously I had to student teach to get my certification. Yeah. And I agree. You got it when you're going up in front of a bunch of young adults that have creative minds of their own, and they're going to come up with questions that they're going to ask you and expect you to know the answer, or at least have a educated response or thought or philosophy around it. You got to be ready to go, man. When you walk in that classroom,
you do. It's such an invigorating experience. I think if I look back on everything again, if I went back 30 years in my life, I went back to those college years, I might actually truly choose a different direction. I might have chose education as an area of focus. But with that said, I think I'm better at what I do because of all those other experiences I've been able to have.
I forget where I read this, but it inspired me to always think about maybe in retirement or something to go back and teach. But as somebody had written something that I read, it was something, I forget the phrasing, but essentially the premise was the best teachers in the world are the ones that didn't go to school, then become teachers. They're the ones that went off and made a bunch of mistakes and did a bunch of stuff and then came back and have all this perspective as well as the content to share with the students.
Yeah, there's a certain portion of any class where the philosophy of the topic makes sense, right? The book learning, the knowledge that's been gained over the years make a lot of sense. But the ability to marry it to practical application and the ability to marry it to the fact that, if I'm teaching a strategic management class, I can talk about business strategy and how it failed me in the past, or how my focus on that strategy or my development of that strategy failed me because I didn't think through it the right way or didn't apply it the right way. I love talking about the failures that I've had. Love it.
Yeah. At one point in time when we were talking, we probably were talking over like a 6 a.m. coffee at Starbucks.
We were.
Which is wild, everybody listening. This guy loves his coffee immediately at the opening door of Starbucks in the morning.
I used to appreciate back a few years when Starbucks opened to 5:30.
Man,
this 6 o'clock shift over the past 2 years really puts a dent in my morning.
I remember when you told me that, you want to meet? Sure. How about Starbucks? Sure. What time? When do they open? 6 a.m. Oh my God. All right. Okay. Well, this guy's serious. But I suppose that's how you get things done.
It is, and then those early mornings, like this morning, if you looked at my desk today, I don't have a Starbucks cup on my desk. I have a Maple Fields cup because it's the only thing open at 4:45 when I'm passing through, right?
God. I'm just doing the back timer, okay, so he's there picking up the coffee at 4:45, so that means he left his house at this time, and then he woke up at this time, and it's like, oh my, impressive, man. But that's what it takes, right? This is kind of a fun little thing, though, that I was going with the whole coffee digression here, is you told me that you wrote a book.
I did indeed.
Because, again, you're not busy enough. What'd you write a book on? Tell me about that experience. I can't even imagine that.
So I started with articles. So I published quite a few articles with Fast Company magazine, a few other websites as well. I've probably written 50, 60, maybe 70 articles. And the truth is, I hate it. I really hate writing. It's probably one of the most painful things I have to push myself to do, but I do it because I do it with an end in mind.
Yeah.
And the end is credibility. The end is the ability to maybe share an idea or two that I have and touch people that I typically don't have the ability to touch. But I really have a hard time sitting down and writing. I don't have the patience for it. And I know patience is a virtue.
You're an executive summary guy.
I am. Can we sum this up in 5 seconds or less, right? Get it down to 10 words and I'm good. But along that journey, I was encouraged to write a book, right?
Yeah.
Take some of these articles, focus on some of the concepts I was talking about and write a book. And it sounded great. So I started. And I tried to do, back in the day, I was doing a lot of work in the HR space, so human resources, which I think is a bad word for that department anyway, but that's a whole different topic we could venture down. But what I did see in working with a lot of my clients is HR was still seen, this is many years ago now, still seen as maybe more of a back office type part of an organization, right? It never had the seat at the big table, let's say. And now over the past few years, you've seen a lot of companies create chief human resource officers, chief people officers, and things like that. They're starting to elevate the significance and the role because of the extreme asset that it covers, right? The extreme impact that people have on an organization. But it wasn't so much that way for a lot of organizations back in the day. But what you did see is all these companies that invested so much time and so much energy in marketing and sales. So I looked at that and said, if a lot of these companies spent the same amount of time, energy, and money in marketing and sales as they did in HR, maybe they have completely different organizations. And maybe the shift, maybe spending more on the HR realm done right, mitigates or reduces some of the spend that we have to have on the sales and marketing side, maybe. So I came up with the concept of trying to marry the world of HR to the world of marketing. And the book was nothing short of a necessity, The Power of Marketing in HR.
I like it.
So the intent was in the first 30, 40, 50, 60,000 words was to really be philosophical. Look at the research, look at the data, kind of the easy part of the book, right? And then take that philosophy, that structure, that core, and then spend the second half of the book talking about, okay, how do we practically apply all of this now? So I did the first part of the book. I got tens of thousands of words into it, and I could just feel it wearing on me. Every 10,000 words I wrote, I felt like I aged 10 years, maybe 20 years. It was just bad. And I got to a point where I completely lost interest in it. But I had half of a written book. So the beauty of self-publishing today allowed me to take what I had written, quickly summarize it with 2 pages of a summary, and slap it in an ebook and get it up on Amazon and iTunes. And that was my book. So it's not actually a completed work. I'm sure that the 2 people that have purchased it on Amazon so far can appreciate my effort and my work.
Yeah.
But that's the closest I've gotten. Again, I think if you looked at it, it's, I don't know, is it 50 or 60,000 words that it's in there? But it's pretty substantial. But again, it only tells half the story. And it really doesn't get to the point where it talks about what I envision it to be. And that's the sad part of it.
It reminds me of our conversation over coffee at 6 a.m. About how you are an executive summary guy. And at one point in time, you had leveraged a teammate's love of books to help you consume more books in a way.
Yeah, there's been this guilty side of my life, let's call it, where I know there's a lot of great books out there. I know there's a lot of great authors out there. But again, going back to my lack of patience, I'm the type of person that I can't sit in front of a television for an hour and just watch television. I'll have my laptop on my lap, I'll have an iPad in my hand, and I'll do something else at the same time. I just don't have patience. My wife will support that fact. Weekends are sometimes one of the most dreaded times of the week for me. If I come up to a weekend where I have a Saturday or Sunday with nothing on it, that's been many of the times where, I've started ripping apart a room and refinishing a room or redoing the bathroom or doing these things because I have a hard time sitting still. I just can't sit still.
Yeah.
So going back to that.
You're an executive summary guy.
I am.
Consume books. Yeah.
Sitting down to read a book, and I think even through my college career, I think I can honestly say that I've never read a book cover to cover. And again, I just don't have the patience for it. And that's something I've tried to work on, but I just haven't been able to conquer by any stretch of the imagination. So I'm the type of person that would quickly, I'd flick 10 pages forward in a book, read a paragraph or 2, flick 10 more pages, read a paragraph or 2. That's how I made it through college. That's how I made it through other books that I wanted to read. But anyway, to your point, at one point in my business life, I had an associate of mine who was an avid reader, just loved to read everything she could possibly read. So it was a marriage made in heaven for me. So I would find these books that I thought might have some concepts in it that I'd like to understand more. She would read them and then give me back an executive summary of it, right? We'd go out to lunch, we'd have a coffee, whatever it might be. Or she'd put bullet points on a piece of paper and say, here are the 3 or 4 things I took away from it. Focus on page 7, 200, and 350. And that's how I digest most of my books during the course of my life.
That's interesting. Well, all of this leads me up to my final real subject that I want to ask you is Capitus.
Capitus.
Where did that baby start from?
So Capitus, again, a year and a half ago, I sold my share in Method 3. All right, moved on from Method 3, focused on my work at BHSN. But I'm always going to have that itch. And there's something about entrepreneurship. There's something about interacting with people, with clients. There's something about the learning that happens from that and the relationships that are built about it. I tell people all the time that at the end of my life, don't measure my success on the amount of money I made. Don't measure my success on the profit that my company has obtained. Measure my success on the amount of people that I've touched along the journey. And there's truth to that. And I think that's what brought me back to the Capitus umbrella. So Capitus is a management consulting company, still very much in its infancy.
Sure.
We're still trying to get it off the ground in our spare time. But it allowed me to bring together a few people, who had some common interests, some ideas, some knowledge that could be shared. And the intent is, I mean, it's a part-time gig for now. It's an opportunity that if we get some consulting relationships along the way, it's better for all of us. It makes us all that much stronger, gives us all that much more insight. So management consulting company focused on, one, some work in the nonprofit sector, because some of the folks that are part of this have some pretty significant experience in the nonprofit sector. Focused on performance, focused on the people side of the business. Going back to the concept that I personally believe that, when we think about our business vision, purpose is at the top.
Yep.
People are second. Profits are third.
Yep.
Right? And the reason I always do that order, there's a lot of people that say people are always first. But people that aren't united around a purpose
Yes.
are just a group of people.
Yes.
So without that unifying cause,
Yes.
I think that's the disconnect in terms of some of the vision that others have. So I believe in purpose first. Come up with that purpose, then unite a team around that purpose. And if you do those two things and you do them well, the profits, the sustainability, the impact will come from that.
Yep.
And that's kind of what the model of Capitus is built upon. And it's something that we'll continue to see what happens with it. We'll water it from time to time and, see what grows from it.
It's hard to have a sort of a side project like that and give it as much attention as your actual day job. It's impossible.
Yep.
I have a side project, so to speak, of Rondak chairs and furniture. Not sure if you've ever heard of it, but now you have.
Yep.
It's just handcrafted furniture right out of my garage.
Love it.
And you can't do it every day. You can't do it every weekend.
No, you
can't. When I water it, so to speak, it produces some great stuff, and it's very enjoyable for me. It sounds like Capitus is kind of that thing for you. It gives you a little entrepreneurial vigor that, when you have the time for it, you can really put some energy behind it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It always feels good to have it there. And again, I've created a variety of relationships over the years. I've got a lot of contacts that I've met over the years, and it's a way to stay in touch with them from time to time as well. So it's a beautiful thing, regardless of how big it gets over the years.
Nationwide presence or
global to a degree.
Global? Wow.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. The amazing feats we can accomplish with business over modern technology.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed, especially when you're sitting here, 30 miles from the international border.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not hard to say you're international.
We're the U.S. suburb of Montreal.
That's right.
Yep. Well, this has been good.
I've enjoyed it.
Yeah. I'm going to wrap this sucker up with
All right.
the Stories of Gumption rapid fire section.
Here we go.
Are you ready?
I'm preparing.
Now, I am really going to throw a loop at you here.
Oh, boy.
Because we had talked about books.
We did.
And I was going to ask you what's a book. But in the moment and following you and connecting with you on LinkedIn, I think of you sometimes as the quote guy.
Oh, boy.
You see where I'm going with this?
Yep.
So instead of asking you what's a book that you would gift to a friend and why, do you happen to have a quote? You can't possibly pick a favorite quote. That's an unfair question.
No.
But do you happen to have a quote that has resonated with you lately and why?
So there has been a quote that I've used time and time again, and it's pretty simple, but it's pretty powerful when you think about it. To be more in the service of others. Simple, sweet. We see it. You see it woven into some of the greatest speeches ever made, some of those powerful speeches ever made, but that concept is there, and the concept is really valid. And I try to live by that every day, whether it's the work I'm doing at BHSN, whether it's my home life, whatever it might be, to be more in the service of others.
I like it.
Wow, you just threw that one out there. That was pretty quick to come up with that one. That was good.
I was just thinking, I'm like, man, I'm always on my computer, and then every once in a while I pop on LinkedIn, and I'm like, oh, Mark's got another quote today. That's awesome. I actually share quotes all the time because I see you doing it, and it's
there you go.
Infectious. It's infectious. Positivity is infectious.
It is.
Number 2, what's a piece of advice that you'd give to your 18-year-old self if you could, knowing what you know now?
Yeah, knowing what I know now. Going back, and I guess this is twofold, right? When I'm asked this, many times when I'm asked this question, my automatic response is stay in school. Don't drop out after 3 years, 2 years, 1 year, college, finish it out. But at the same time, I think it created an opportunity. It created a moment in my life that was really impactful and really changed the direction, right? If I would have done 4 years of undergrad with a pre-med or an engineering focus and then went to med school after that, I wouldn't be where I am today.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I might have had, don't get me wrong, being a physician or something like that, I could have a pretty tremendous impact as well.
Mm-hmm.
But my impact's been different this route, this pathway, and I wouldn't change that for the world. So looking back on it, that would have been my default answer. But I think it goes to that larger question about I wish our academic system, I wish our process, I wish our society allowed people to have more of those types of moments, right? Instead of going right from 12 years of school into 4 years of college, into 2 years of master's, into this, into that. We need to create those opportunities where there's some real hands-on, real-life experience in the middle. Because I look at students today. I look at my own son who's finishing up his first year at SUNY right now, and he doesn't know what he wants to do yet. I didn't know what I wanted to do yet. Man, I changed course.
Mm-hmm.
I changed course completely.
Mm-hmm.
But given that opportunity to spend a year or two after high school, a year or two after undergrad to do something before you get back into the academic realm, I think is powerful. It's very meaningful.
I love it. Number 3, if you could meet any historical figure, who would it be? And why?
Wow. Any historical figure. I thought you were going to ask the board question.
I feel like
wasn't sure where you're going to go.
I feel like Mark Lukens is about to drop some knowledge on me here.
I think I will. I hate to do this, but I'm going to end up skirting around your question. It's funny. Other than, again, there's been a couple moments in my life where I truly recall impactful people. And most of that has been around an opportunity, right? A change, a pivot in my life, let's call it. But when I think about historical folks that I'd like to meet, those that I'd like to meet would be those that I know about today. And if I know about them, I probably know what I need to know to a degree. I think the most powerful thing in my life today is not necessarily 1, 2, or 3 people from history that I'd like to meet. It's 1, 2, or 3 people that I just haven't met yet. And I think it speaks to why I enjoy my work at BHSN, why I enjoy my work leading companies in general, is the ability to truly meet new people every day. And through those interactions, through those moments, through those relationships, it makes me a better person.
I like that one too.
All right.
You're hitting these, you're getting the A+ answers, I think. I got 2 more for you.
All right.
Number 4, it doesn't matter where, but we're going to put up a billboard somewhere. You can put anything you want on it, a graphic, an image, a word, a sentence, a paragraph. I don't care. What would you put up on a billboard if you could?
I'm a big believer in purpose. I might just do something as simple as purpose. And, I think the meaning is manifold, right? From a business perspective, purpose trumps all in my mind. Why do we do what we do? If you look at the state of our political environment today, I think purpose means a lot.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure we're there, but we'll save the political commentary.
Sure. It's bad out there.
From a societal perspective, the purpose and the fact that, we just need to acknowledge the fact that everybody has their own purpose and their own beliefs. And, our purpose is to be accepting of that and understand that and relate to that. And I don't think we spend enough time thinking about the concept of purpose.
I agree with you. I like that. Last question. Here it is.
All right.
If you could assemble a 3-person board of directors to guide and mentor you through the rest of your life, it can be alive, deceased, famous, or not. The goal is to come up with 3 people that you would pick to be on your personal board of directors, and why.
Wow. So here we go with the, okay. Wow, I hate to throw another one at you. But my mind immediately goes to the fact that I think I'd really have a hard time here sitting down and scribbling 3 people's names on a piece of paper for you. Again, I think the power, and I don't want this to sound mushy or anything, but I think I get more excited about the fact that maybe it's 3 people I've never met before. 3 people from various points in their life, various areas of the world, whatever it might be. But just 3 people, regardless of their skill set, regardless of their educational background, regardless of where they are in their life cycle, regardless of any of that, just 3 people. And start there.
I think the power of that answer is something that a lot of us forget from time to time, but no matter how much perspective you think you have, you don't have enough.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. I agree with that.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
And there's a famous quote there too, perspective is the objective, right?
Yeah.
If you're not constantly looking for opportunities to expand your perspective, then you're doing something wrong.
Yeah. I think if we sat here and we thought about 3 people, most of us would think about 3 people that are aligned with what we do day in and day out, or those experiences that we've had.
Yeah.
But what that does is it doesn't challenge us on those things that we haven't experienced.
Exactly.
And I'd like to be challenged on those things I haven't experienced.
Well, this has been good, man. I've really enjoyed this one. This
Likewise.
has been a good conversation. Do you have any sending message you'd like to provide to the listeners today?
If you need an Adirondack chair, www.
Yeah, right. I don't even have a website. That's the problem.
Jeez.
The problem is, I just talking to my wife about this. We're taking a big digression here, but like, if I put up a website, I'm going to start getting more orders than I can keep up with, because with only just an Instagram, I'm not going to go into detail about all the particulars here. I recently got a call for someone looking to have me make them 30 farmhouse tables.
Wow.
So I don't need necessarily to market this thing because I need to balance my life. But
wow, that's fantastic though.
But it's no www. doesn't exist.
Doesn't exist.
But Rondack Chairs and Furniture, I suppose, on Instagram or Facebook.
All right, I'm gonna have to check that out. That's pretty cool.
Look at that. I'll have to give you the $1 after the podcast for plugging it for me. Well, thanks so much for your time, Mark. I know you're a very busy guy, and we've tried to get this together a couple times, and
we have.
Schedules haven't aligned for whatever reason, and I really appreciate it.
Likewise. It's been a pleasure. I'm glad we finally brought this together.
Awesome. Enjoy.